We're back at our router table, and I put the 1/4 inch bit in. As you can see, it's sticking up way too high. But I wanted to show you how we set this thing up. What we're doing is we're cutting in the groove for the bottom. Now technically I could walk over to the shaper number 2 for the drawer bottoms and just cut a groove. And the reason I'm not is because I have it set to be 1/2 inch up off the ground, up off the table. Now by doing that, it would work. I'm not saying it won't, because it will, but I'm now only got about 1/3 of the height that I'd like. So I'm making this, instead of 1/2 inch, I'm making that 1/4 inch. That allows me to have a deeper tray. And it's simple to do. Once you have the bit in, set it like you did before, using some of this white melamine, since this is what I'm using for the bottom anyway. Remember to go down farther than you need, and then I'm going to stoop down and raise it back up till it's a little bit proud of the top. I can just feel the edge of that bit. So it's just a hair taller, and that's good. It'll help it fit later. So now my height is correct. And what I'm looking for is 1/4 inch from the inside of this to the inside of this. Now this is my fence, and I'm going to lock that in just like I did before. It helps because there's not this break in between where these small pieces might get jammed in there. If you tilt a little, you'll get it stuck. So I put something on there for these little pieces so it'll slide nice and easy. But I need to do 1/4 inch. Now I could just take a tape measure or a square, whatever, and just measure it. But if you have a piece of this stuff laying around, just set it right there, pull the fence in until it touches lightly, and lock it in. There's 1/4 inch. And if it's a hair off, doesn't matter. It'll work just fine. Now go ahead and run all 4 pieces and make sure that this side, these cuts are down. So I want to see the longest part here as I'm cutting. Good. Now remember, these pieces are really tiny. If you aren't sure you like this, you can use a push stick. All these pieces are now ready to have the bottom, and we can put them together. So let's figure out how big the bottom has to be. Now, you could just take a tape measure, but it's difficult. The bottom needs to go from here to there on the inside, halfway. So I could just take a tape measure and burn 1 inch. That means instead of starting at the hook, move in 1 inch, and that will give me a measurement. The other thing that I can do is, these are 1/2 inch thick. This goes in 1/4 inch, halfway. So if I take the whole distance and subtract 1/4 and 1/4, that will give me this distance. I do that the same thing to the 10s, if these are 10 inches, and they should be. 10 minus 1/4 plus and another 1/4, that's 10 minus 1/2. I know that that bottom should be 9.5 inches long. And if I confirm that with my tape measure, I burn 1 inch, and sure enough, I'm at 10.5 or 9.5 because I'm burning that inch. So that's correct. So we'll cut the piece to what it should be and then put it together. If any gaps appear, we'll trim it from there until it fits correctly. We cut the piece. Now let's see if it fits. It's going to be a little bit snug, and that's good. It means this will stay together real easy. Now, how do I know if it needs to be trimmed? Well, we're looking at the corners here, and if these corners don't match up here, especially down below, you can kind of see it as well here. If there's a gap there and it isn't closing tight, then I know I need to trim a little bit off of both. You can do it on the table saw or even the sander if it's just a hair. I'd probably just table saw it off. Keep going until these all match up correctly. I need no gaps. I don't want to see any gaps. Now it's time for some glue up. Now, we don't need big clamps for this. This isn't a very big project. All I need is some green tape and a bottle of glue. So what we do to glue up a box is we're going to take each piece and lay them down so this groove is down. Groove is down towards me. Small, big, small. Groove is down towards me. Big, groove is down towards me. So this way. So they're all lined up. So essentially, if I wrapped them up, I'd get the entire box. And all I'm going to do is take a piece of this green tape and get a decent sized piece. I mean, we're talking about 6 inches here. Make sure they're lined up top to bottom, and stretch it just a little bit on those joints. This tape is made for this. There we go. So I can pull it tight, and then it will act as a clamp as we're putting this together. All right, one more here. And pull it tight. Good. Now I'm going to pull off one more piece because, of course, I'll need a 4th one, and I'll just kind of stick it on the side for later. Now then, we have this. I'm going to flip it around, and we're ready to put in the bottom. So I tend to put the bottom in one of the big ones, but it really doesn't matter. Also, please make sure the white side is in. Not many things worse when you're done gluing this little intricate project and you've glued it upside down. Take a little glue, and you don't need a ton. Enough to fill that joint a little bit. Because the more you put in, the more it's going to squirt out, and then you've just got to clean it all. So we need enough to do the job, of course, but not so much that it's just dripping all over the place. Okay. Then just kind of fold it up. That folds up onto there. And that folds in there. It's snug. It's nice and tight. So I'm going to push that in a little bit. And then down to there. Good. Now you can see I've got a bit of glue. I'm just going to get rid of that. Okay, but all the other pieces are holding those joints fairly tight. You can see I didn't put a lot of glue, but I've still got squeeze out. So I'm going to take care of that afterwards. Take my spare piece of tape, make sure that joint is nice and tight. Take care of that extra now, and stretch it. Now we've got our tray. Now is the time. Take the time to get a wet paper towel and clean out any of the joints, because it's just going to save you a lot of time later.